The detention center's alarm shrieked at a frequency that made my antennae curl inward, and I, Security Officer Vrax of the Galactic Educational Compliance Division, felt my 3 stomachs drop simultaneously. This was not supposed to happen. Nothing ever happened at Detention Block 7. We processed minor infractions, confiscated contraband snacks, and occasionally dealt with students who talked back to their instructors. We did not, under any circumstances, deal with structural breaches. Yet here I was, staring at my console as red lights flashed across every screen, indicating that Cell 14B had just registered what the system politely called catastrophic door failure. Cell 14B, where we'd placed the human child 2 hours ago. Please tell me that's a sensor malfunction, I muttered, my mandibles clicking nervously as I pulled up the surveillance feed. My partner, a 4-armed Quelian named Bortix, leaned over my shoulder, his breathing tubes wheezing with what I'd learned to recognize as anxiety. "When has anything involving humans ever been a sensor malfunction?" Bortix asked, which was unfortunately an excellent point. The video feed loaded, and I watched in real time as something that absolutely, categorically, should not exist on an educational space station proceeded to tear the reinforced titanium door off its magnetic hinges. Not pick the lock, not disable the security system, not even blast it with some kind of hidden weapon. No, this creature simply grabbed the doorframe and pulled until the metal shrieked, buckled, and surrendered. "That's not the human child," I said, my voice climbing 3 octaves higher than professional decorum typically allowed. "Tell me that's not what I think it is." Bortix made a sound like someone gargling gravel. "That appears to be what your species database files under Earth Fauna. Category: mammals, subcategory: mustelids, specific designation: honey badger." The creature in question, roughly half a meter long and covered in black and white fur that somehow looked both adorable and absolutely terrifying, had just finished destroying our detention cell door. It shook itself, producing a rattling sound from somewhere in its compact body, then turned its head toward the camera. Its eyes, small and dark, seemed to look directly through the lens and into my soul, where they found me wanting. "How?" I began, then had to stop and restart because my translator was making confused beeping sounds. "How did a honey badger get onto this station? How did it get into a locked detention cell? And why, by all the stars in the void, is it trying to extract our prisoner?" The human child in question, a small female named Emma Larson, who'd been detained for the heinous crime of reprogramming the cafeteria's food synthesizer to produce something called pizza pockets, stood in the corner of her cell looking significantly less surprised than I felt she should be. In fact, if I was reading human facial expressions correctly after my mandatory cultural sensitivity training, she looked downright smug. "Mr. Pickles?" the child exclaimed, which made absolutely no sense, because pickles were a preserved vegetable product, and this was clearly a carnivorous mammal that probably ate fear for breakfast. "You found me!" The honey badger, apparently named Mr. Pickles despite lacking any pickle-like characteristics whatsoever, made a chittering sound that my translator rendered as aggressive affection. Then it did something that made my training completely irrelevant. It spoke, not in growls or barks that required translation, but in perfectly clear Galactic Standard, with what I could only describe as a working-class Terran accent. Yeah, I found you. You're welcome, by the way. Do you have any idea how many ventilation shafts I had to crawl through? This station's ductwork is a disgrace. I'm writing a letter to the maintenance department." I blinked all 6 of my eyes in sequence, which is what my species does when reality has decided to take a vacation and leave us alone with the impossible. "The honey badger is talking," Bortix observed helpfully. "Yes, thank you, I've noticed," I snapped, my hand hovering over the emergency lockdown button. "Attention! Unauthorized Earth mammal currently destroying station property. You are in violation of approximately 47 different station regulations, including but not limited to unlawful entry, destruction of secured facilities, and being a non-sentient creature that is somehow speaking Galactic Standard." Mr. Pickles turned his attention from Emma to the camera, and I swear on my ancestors' molted shells that he rolled his eyes. First of all, who you calling non-sentient? Second, your regulations can go take a long walk out the nearest airlock. Third, you locked up a kid for making pizza pockets. Pizza pockets! You know what we call that where I come from? We call that Thursday. The creature has a point about the severity of the infraction, Bortix whispered, which was not helpful given that he was supposed to be backing me up during this crisis. Emma had moved closer to Mr. Pickles now, and the small mammal turned to inspect her with what appeared to be genuine concern, his aggressive posture softening into something almost gentle. Almost, because there was still an undercurrent of, "I will absolutely destroy anyone who threatens this child," radiating from every centimeter of his stocky body. "Did they hurt you?" Mr. Pickles asked, his voice dropping to a lower register that somehow made him sound even more dangerous. "No, they just put me in here and said my parents would be called," Emma replied, scratching behind the badger's ears in a way that produced a sound like a malfunctioning engine. "But the door was locked, and I couldn't call you because they took my communicator." "Yeah, well, locked doors aren't really a problem for me," Mr. Pickles said, glancing back at the twisted metal. "That used to be a perfectly functional security door. Never have been, never will be. Plus, you know the deal. You get in trouble, I get you out of trouble. That's what uncles are for." "You're not actually her uncle," I felt compelled to point out through the intercom, because apparently I hadn't learned my lesson about arguing with impossible situations. "You're a Mellivora capensis, a species of mustelid known for aggressive behavior and remarkable resistance to venoms and physical trauma. You're not a human relative." Mr. Pickles fixed me with a stare that could have melted hull plating. "Listen here, you six-eyed, rule-loving bureaucrat. Family isn't about genetics. It's about who shows up when you need them. Emma's mom saved my life when I was just a kid, pulled me out of a research facility that was doing things I won't mention in front of the kid. The Larson family took me in, gave me a home, and treated me like I mattered. So yeah, I'm her uncle. Got a problem with that?" I did not, in fact, have a problem with that. What I had was a rapidly growing sense that this situation was spiraling far beyond my pay grade. "Security protocols require that I ask how you learned to speak Galactic Standard," I said, trying to regain some semblance of professional authority, "and how you managed to navigate through a space station without being detected." Mr. Pickles snorted, which sounded like someone clearing a severely congested nasal passage. "I had a lot of time in that research facility before Mrs. Larson busted me out. They were testing all kinds of neural enhancement procedures, trying to create smarter animals for space exploration. Joke's on them, I was already smart. The treatments just gave me the ability to tell them exactly what I thought of their stupid experiments. As for getting around your station, please. I'm a honey badger. We don't ask for permission. We don't wait for invitations, and we definitely don't let things like secure facilities stop us from going where we need to go." Emma giggled, a sound that seemed entirely inappropriate given the severity of the situation, but which also reminded me that despite the irregularities of her companion, she was still just a child who'd been separated from her family over what was, admittedly, a fairly minor offense. "Your documentation indicated you were traveling alone," Bortix said, finally contributing something useful to the conversation. "There was no mention of a companion animal, enhanced or otherwise." "Yeah, because the last time Mom declared me on passenger manifests, we got stuck in customs for 6 hours while some overzealous inspector tried to figure out what category I belonged in," Mr. Pickles explained, his tone suggesting he'd found the experience about as pleasant as a root canal performed with a rusty spoon. "So now I travel in Emma's luggage, specifically in a modified suitcase with air holes, a water dispenser, and a collection of stress balls I can destroy during the boring parts of spaceflight." "That's completely against regulations," I protested, knowing even as I said it that regulations meant approximately nothing to a creature who treated reinforced security doors like tissue paper. "So is locking up kids for minor food-related infractions, but here we are," Mr. Pickles shot back. "Now you've got 2 options. Option 1, you let Emma go with a warning, We all pretend this never happened, and I don't have to file a formal complaint about the structural integrity of your detention facilities. Option 2, we do this the hard way, which involves me working my way through every single door between here and the station commander's office until someone with actual sense gets involved. I looked at Bortix. Bortix looked at me. We both looked at our console, where regulations clearly stated that property damage, unauthorized entry, and threats against station security required immediate escalation to armed response teams. We also both looked at the video feed, where a honey badger who could apparently speak, reason, and destroy reinforced doors stood protectively next to a child whose greatest crime was wanting familiar food. The armed response teams won't arrive for another 8 minutes, Bortix noted quietly. That's 8 minutes for him to cause approximately 1 million credits worth of additional damage, I replied, my career flashing before my eyes. Or, Bortix suggested carefully, we could acknowledge that the detention was perhaps overzealous for a first-time minor infraction, release the child to her companion's custody, and recommend that the family attend a brief educational session about station food synthesis protocols. It was remarkable how quickly regulations became flexible when faced with a creature that treated them like interesting suggestions rather than immutable laws. Fine, I said, hitting the release command before I could reconsider. But this entire incident goes in my report, and the Larson family is absolutely getting an official warning about declaring all travel companions, regardless of how difficult they make customs processing. The cell door, or what remained of it, slid open with a grinding sound that suggested it would need complete replacement. Emma immediately ran to Mr. Pickles and wrapped her arms around his thick furred body, and the honey badger made that strange, purring growling sound again. See, was that so hard? Mr. Pickles asked, waddling toward the exit with Emma walking beside him. Now, where'd you put her stuff? And please tell me you didn't damage her communicator, because that thing costs more than your monthly salary, and Mrs. Larson will have words if it needs replacing. 20 minutes later, I watched on the external cameras as Emma Larson and her utterly impossible uncle made their way through the station toward their family's temporary quarters. Other pedestrians gave them a wide berth, which showed significantly more survival instinct than I'd managed to display. Do you think all humans travel with enhanced Earth animals? Bortix asked, his breathing tube still wheezing slightly from stress. I sincerely hope not, I replied, beginning the lengthy process of filing an incident report that absolutely no one would believe. Though given everything we've learned about humans over the past few years, I'm not willing to bet against it. My console beeped with an incoming message from the station commander, who'd apparently been alerted to the security breach and wanted an immediate explanation. I stared at the cursor blinking in the message field, trying to figure out how to explain that a honey badger had assaulted our detention center, negotiated a prisoner's release, and left with nothing more than a warning about travel documentation. The truth was, humanity had only been part of the galactic community for about 15 years, and in that time they'd systematically violated every assumption we'd made about how species should behave. They befriended predators that should have eaten them. They turned impossible situations into Tuesday afternoons. They treated rules like friendly suggestions and somehow made it work. And apparently, some of them enhanced their companion animals with neural modifications that turned them into four-legged lawyers with an attitude problem and the physical capabilities to back it up. Officer Vrax, Bortix said carefully, the station commander is waiting for your report. I sighed, all three of my stomachs churning with what humans would probably call anxiety, but what I recognized as the feeling of watching one's career implode in real time. Tell him, I said slowly, that we've had an incident involving human cultural practices we don't fully understand, that all parties have been safely released, and that I strongly recommend we update our detention protocols to account for the possibility of rescue attempts by enhanced Earth fauna. Will he believe that? I pulled up the security footage again, watching Mr. Pickles tear through our door like it was made of paper, and shook my head. Probably not, but it has the distinct advantage of being completely true, which is more than I can say for any other explanation I might offer. As I began typing the report, I made a mental note to research Earth animals more thoroughly. If honey badgers were capable of this level of chaos, I shuddered to think what other creatures humans might have enhanced and were currently smuggling onto stations throughout the galaxy. Somewhere in the family quarters section of the station, I imagined Emma Larson was being reunited with her parents, who were probably getting an earful from a very opinionated badger about the injustice of detention for pizza pocket creation. The thought made me smile despite the mountain of paperwork ahead of me. Humans, I decided, were absolutely going to be the death of orderly bureaucracy throughout the galaxy. And based on everything I'd witnessed today, they had the perfect allies to help them do it. Mr. Pickles had made that abundantly clear. 3 days after what my colleagues were now calling the Badger incident, I received a summons to appear before Station Commander Thilla, a Vaxorian whose species was known for their legendary patience and diplomatic approach to complex problems. I'd heard she once negotiated a peaceful resolution between two rival mining corporations who'd been shooting at each other over asteroid rights for 6 months. Looking at her face across the desk, which had turned a shade of purple that my cultural database suggested meant extremely displeased, I suspected her patience had finally met its match. "Officer Vrax," she began, her voice carrying the careful neutrality of someone trying very hard not to scream. "I have read your incident report approximately 7 times. Each reading has left me more confused than the last. Would you care to explain, in simple terms, how a detention facility designed to hold potentially dangerous individuals was compromised by what is essentially a large weasel?" "Honey badger, ma'am," I corrected without thinking, then immediately regretted it when her color deepened to almost violet. "The distinction is apparently important to them." "Them," Commander Thilla repeated slowly. "You're referring to the animal as if it were a sentient being." "With respect, Commander, after listening to it threaten to file formal complaints about our ductwork maintenance standards, I'm not entirely sure what else to call it." She pressed her primary manipulator appendages against her temples in a gesture I'd learned meant headache incoming. "The Larson family has filed a counter-complaint," she said, sliding a datapad across her desk toward me. "They're claiming their daughter was unjustly detained for what they call creative problem-solving, and that our security measures are inadequate given that their family companion, and I quote, had to handle the situation himself." I picked up the pad and scrolled through the complaint, which was written in surprisingly formal legal language and signed with a paw print that had apparently been accepted as a valid signature by our automated systems. "Mr. Pickles wrote this himself?" I asked weakly. "According to the metadata, yes. He also included a 17-page attachment detailing every building code violation he observed while traversing our ventilation system. Maintenance is having a collective breakdown. Bordex, who'd been summoned along with me, made a sound like wind escaping from a punctured tire. Are the violations legitimate?" Commander Thilla's expression suggested she wished they weren't. "Every single one. The engineering team has confirmed that we've been operating with substandard air filtration in sections G through K for approximately 8 months. We're lucky we haven't had a contamination incident." "So the honey badger is technically a whistleblower," I said, wondering if my life could possibly get any stranger. The universe, as usual, took that as a challenge. The door to the commander's office chimed, and her assistant's voice came through the intercom, sounding distinctly nervous. "Ma'am, you have visitors. The Larson family is here, along with their, companion. They're requesting an audience." Commander Thilla closed all 4 of her eyes briefly, which in Vaxorian body language meant something between, "Give me strength," and, "I don't get paid enough for this." "Send them in," she said with the resignation of someone watching their orderly universe crumble into chaos. The door opened, and Emma Larson entered first, looking significantly cleaner and better rested than when I'd last seen her in the detention cell. Behind her came 2 adult humans, who I correctly assumed were her parents. The woman, tall with dark hair pulled back in a practical style, had the bearing of someone who'd seen challenging situations before and survived them through sheer determination. The man, shorter and stockier, wore the kind of easy smile that suggested he found most of life's absurdities amusing rather than threatening. And waddling in last, looking around the office with an air of critical assessment, came Mr. Pickles. "Commander Thilla," the woman said, extending her hand in the human greeting gesture. "I'm Captain Julie Larson, civilian freight transport. This is my husband Marcus, and you've already met our daughter Emma and my brother Pickles." "Your brother," Commander Thilla repeated, shaking the offered hand with visible effort at maintaining composure. "Adoptive brother," Mr. Pickles clarified, hopping up onto a chair with surprising agility. "The paperwork was complicated, but Julie's got a good lawyer. Technically makes me a naturalized Earth citizen with full legal rights, which includes the right to travel freely and protect family members from unjust detention." I watched Commander Thilla's face cycle through approximately 12 different colors, none of which my database had helpful translations for. "Mr. Pickles," she began carefully, "while I appreciate the legal complexities of your situation, you destroyed station property and threatened security personnel. I knocked down one door that was keeping a child locked up for making food, and I pointed out some safety violations that could have killed people," Mr. Pickles countered, his small dark eyes fixed on the commander with unsettling intensity. "From where I'm sitting, I did you a favor. 2 favors, actually, if you count the ventilation report." Marcus Larson coughed in a way that sounded suspiciously like suppressed laughter. "Commander, we're willing to pay for the door repairs. We understand that Pickles' methods can be, well, direct, but we hope you can see this situation from our perspective. Emma's 11 years old. She modified a food synthesizer because the cafeteria options made her homesick. That's not criminal behavior. That's a child adapting to difficult circumstances. The modification could have introduced contaminants into the food supply system, I felt obligated to point out, even though my heart wasn't really in the argument anymore. "Could have, but didn't," Captain Larson said smoothly. "Because Emma actually knows what she's doing. She's been helping me maintain ship systems since she was 6. The kid understands molecular synthesis better than most adults. She added safety protocols that your cafeteria system didn't even have." Commander Thilla pulled up something on her desk console, her expression growing even more strained. "According to the cafeteria manager's latest report, which I just received an hour ago, student satisfaction with food options has increased by 43% since Emma's modifications. Several species have specifically requested that the pizza pocket option remain available." Emma beamed with pride. Mr. Pickles made a sound like, which my translator rendered as vindicated satisfaction. "So what you're telling me," Commander Thilla said slowly, "is that a human child improved our food services, got punished for it, and then her enhanced honey badger uncle broke her out of detention and exposed critical safety violations in our infrastructure, all while technically being in the right legally." "That's a pretty accurate summary, yeah," Mr. Pickles agreed. "Though I'd argue the broke her out part is misleading. I negotiated her release. The door was just, in the way." Bortix leaned over and whispered to me, "I'm starting to think all our training about human unpredictability was actually understated." He wasn't wrong. Commander Thilla stood up, which made her considerably taller than everyone else in the room except Captain Larson, and walked to the window overlooking the station's main concourse. Below, thousands of beings from hundreds of species went about their daily business, blissfully unaware of the bureaucratic nightmare happening in the office above them. "Here's what's going to happen," she said finally, turning back to face us all. "Emma, your detention is officially rescinded and replaced with a commendation for improving station services. Your modifications to the cafeteria system will remain in place, and we're hiring you as a consultant to review our other synthesizer units. You'll be paid standard contractor rates." Emma's eyes went wide. "Really? I get paid? Really?" "Consider it an apology for the overreaction." Commander Thilla turned her attention to Mr. Pickles. "As for you, the property damage is concerning, but given the circumstances and your willingness to compensate the station, I'm prepared to overlook it. However, I need your word that future issues will be brought to station security through proper channels before you start dismantling our infrastructure." Mr. Pickles tilted his head, considering. "Define proper channels." "Filing a complaint, requesting a meeting, literally anything that doesn't involve destroying doors." "What if the proper channels are too slow and someone's in danger?" Commander Thilla's color shifted to something my database labeled as grudging respect tinged with exasperation. "Then use your judgment, but please try to minimize property damage. And maybe warn us first?" "I can work with that," Mr. Pickles said, extending a paw. Commander Thilla shook it, and I witnessed what was probably the first formal agreement between a station commander and an enhanced honey badger in galactic history. "There is one more thing," Captain Larson said, pulling out her own datapad. "We've been contracted to transport a delegation of Earth animals to the Galactic Biodiversity Conference next month. It's a cultural exchange program showcasing the variety of Earth species and their unique adaptations. After this incident, I thought you should know that several of them have received similar neural enhancements to Pickles." The color drained completely from Commander Thilla's face, leaving her an alarming shade of gray. "How many enhanced animals are we talking about?" she asked weakly. 12. We've got a border collie with advanced mathematics capabilities, a raven who's writing a dissertation on comparative linguistics, an octopus who's developed a new encryption algorithm, and a few others. They're all very well behaved. Mostly. Mostly, I repeated, my career flashing before my eyes for the second time in 3 days. "Well, the raccoon has some boundary issues, but she's working on it with a therapist," Marcus added helpfully. Mr. Pickles snorted. "Rosie's fine. She just has strong opinions about locked containers and takes it personally when people hide food from her." Commander Thilla sat down heavily in her chair, looking like someone who just realized that the quiet administrative posting she'd hoped for had somehow transformed into the front line of a cultural revolution she didn't understand and couldn't control. "Is every human ship traveling with enhanced animals?" she asked, directing the question at me for some reason, as if I'd somehow become an expert on human weirdness in the past 72 hours. "Unknown, ma'am. Though statistical probability suggests it's more common than previously documented," I replied, because saying probably yes seemed too terrifying to contemplate. Emma raised her hand like she was in a classroom. "Commander, I know this is all really weird from your perspective, but I promise we're not trying to cause trouble. It's just that humans have been living with animals for thousands of years, and when we figured out how to enhance their intelligence, it seemed mean not to offer them the choice. Most of them said yes because they were curious about talking back to us and telling us exactly what they think of our life choices," Mr. Pickles added with what sounded suspiciously like amusement. "You'd be surprised how many arguments you lose when your dog can explain why your reasoning is flawed using formal logic." "Actually, I wouldn't be surprised at all at this point," Commander Thilla muttered. She pulled herself together with visible effort, her color returning to something approaching normal. "Very well. Captain Larson, your family is cleared to continue your journey. Emma, please report to the cafeteria manager's office tomorrow to begin your consulting work. And, Mr. Pickles, welcome to the station, I suppose. Try not to break anything else. No promises, but I'll do my best," Mr. Pickles replied cheerfully. As the Larson family filed out of the office, Emma waved at me with a bright smile, and Mr. Pickles paused at the doorway. "Hey, Officer Vrax," he called back. "For what it's worth, you handled this pretty well. Most security types would have tried the armed response team approach, which would have ended badly for everyone. You showed good judgment. Coming from a honey badger who'd recently torn through a reinforced door, it was probably the strangest compliment I'd ever received. It was also, oddly, one of the most satisfying." After they left, Commander Thilla and I sat in silence for several minutes, processing the conversation we'd just survived. "Sir," Bordix ventured eventually, "should we update our security protocols to account for enhanced Earth animals?" "Yes," Commander Thilla said immediately. And our customs documentation, and our visitor registration systems, and probably our insurance policies. Vrax, you're in charge of drafting new guidelines for human companions. Try to make them comprehensive enough to cover talking raccoons with therapists. Yes, ma'am, I replied, mentally adding, become expert on Earth fauna to my career path, right next to question all life choices. The next 4 weeks were, in a word, educational. Emma's consulting work transformed the cafeteria into the most popular location on the station, with lines stretching down corridors as various species discovered the joy of customizable food options. The engineering team used Mr. Pickles' ventilation report to overhaul our entire air circulation system, preventing what analysis suggested would have been a serious contamination event within 6 months. And I spent my time learning more about Earth animals than I'd ever imagined wanting to know. It turned out that humans had enhanced hundreds of different species, each bringing unique perspectives and capabilities. The border collie Captain Larson mentioned, a brilliant mathematician named Sophie, stopped by the station briefly and spent 3 hours explaining quantum probability to our astrophysics team in terms they actually understood. The Raven, called Professor Nightwing without any apparent irony, delivered a guest lecture on communication theory that had students from 17 different species taking notes. Even the raccoon, Rosie, proved less problematic than anticipated. She did break into the evidence locker, but only to prove it could be done. And she wrote a detailed security analysis afterward that resulted in significant upgrades. Mr. Pickles became something of a station celebrity. He set up what he called office hours in one of the recreation areas, where anyone could come ask questions about Earth, humans, or what it was like to be an enhanced animal. I attended one session out of curiosity and stayed for 2 hours, fascinated by his stories about the research facility, his rescue, and his adoption into the Larson family. The thing people don't get about humans, he explained to a group of young students from various species, is that they don't see other creatures as lesser. They see potential friends, family, allies. When they enhanced us, it wasn't about creating servants or tools. It was about having conversations with beings they'd always wondered about. My sister Julie used to sit next to my enclosure at the facility and talk to me for hours before she broke me out. She treated me like I mattered before I could even talk back. That's just how humans are. One of the students, a young Quillian, raised a tentacle. But doesn't it bother you that they changed you, that you're not natural anymore? Mr. Pickles considered the question seriously. Kid, I'm a honey badger. In nature, I'd spend my life fighting snakes, eating bees, and probably dying young from something trying to eat me back. Now I can read, argue philosophy, and enjoy complex flavors beyond meat and more meat. Plus, I can tell my family exactly how much I love them instead of just hoping they understand. Yeah, the enhancements changed me, but I consented to the final procedures once I could communicate. And honestly, I wouldn't go back. Being able to express yourself is worth everything. I found myself nodding along and caught several other adults in the audience doing the same. On the day the Larson family was scheduled to depart, I went to the docking bay to see them off. Emma ran up and hugged me, which surprised me enough that I forgot to be awkward about it. Thank you for not shooting Mr. Pickles, she said seriously. I know some security people would have. Thank you for improving our cafeteria and teaching me that rules should serve people, not the other way around, I replied, and meant it. Captain Larson shook my hand with a grip that suggested she could probably tear doors off hinges herself if properly motivated. Officer Vrax, you've got good instincts. The galaxy's changing fast with humans in it, and we need people like you helping bridge the gap. If you ever want a job in private security, look me up. Marcus handed me a small wrapped package. Julie's right. You treated our weird family with respect when you could have made everything harder. This is just a little thank you. I opened it later, after they'd departed, and he found a hand-carved wooden figure of a honey badger standing on its hind legs, one paw raised in what might have been a wave or a warning. Attached was a note in Mr. Pickles' distinctive scrawl. Remember, doors are just suggestions. The good ones know when to open. Commander Thilla found me in my office that evening, staring at the carving. "They got to you too, huh?" she said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "Is it that obvious?" "You're smiling at a wooden badger." "Yeah, it's obvious." She paused, then added, "I got a message from Galactic Administration. Apparently, our handling of the Larson incident is being used as a case study in adaptive security protocols. They want us to help train other stations on how to work with human cultural practices." "Us? But we barely knew what we were doing." "Exactly. We improvised, adapted, and found solutions that respected everyone involved, instead of rigidly enforcing rules that didn't fit the situation. That's apparently revolutionary in some circles." She stood to leave, then turned back. "Vrax, humans have been in the galactic community for 15 years, and they've spent that time systematically teaching us that our way isn't the only way. Maybe not even the best way. It's uncomfortable and chaotic and absolutely exhausting." "But," I prompted, sensing there was more, "but it's also exciting. When was the last time you learned something that genuinely surprised you? When did following procedure ever feel like an adventure?" She smiled, an expression her species used rarely. "A honey badger wrote a better safety report than our entire engineering department. A child fixed problems our experts didn't know existed. If that's what chaos looks like, maybe we could use a bit more of it." After she left, I sat alone with my thoughts and my wooden badger, thinking about doors and rules and the strange, wonderful family that had torn through both with equal enthusiasm. Somewhere out there, the Larson family was traveling between stars, carrying their enhanced companions and probably causing delightful havoc wherever they went. Emma would improve food systems, Mr. Pickles would point out structural flaws, and Captain Larson would negotiate impossible situations with the casual competence of someone who'd raised both a brilliant child and a talking honey badger. And I, Security Officer Vrax of the Galactic Educational Compliance Division, had learned the most important lesson of my career. When humans and their enhanced animals come knocking, or in Mr. Pickles' case, tearing through your doors, the wisest response isn't to reach for your weapons manual. It's to listen, adapt, and maybe prepare yourself for the fact that everything you thought you knew about the universe is about to get a whole lot more interesting. The wooden badger on my desk seemed to approve, its carved paw forever raised in greeting or warning, reminding me that the best doors know when to open. And thanks to one determined honey badger named Mr. Pickles, I'd finally learned to recognize the difference.